What's up? What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Real Estate Power Play podcast. Guys, we do this every Tuesday afternoon, just sharing some highlights of our previous week and how we can help others and newer investors and experienced investors get leveling up in their business and just creating some power play movements in their own real estate investing business. We have today Mark Monroe. What's up, Mark? What's the word?
Hey, I'm doing very well. How about you,
And we
Gabe?
got
How's everything
Marty
going?
Grisanti. Sorry, man.
Yo, let's go.
Let's go. Let's go. Okay, guys. So we're going to hit it hard today. We got a lot of questions. I had some pre-questions beforehand, just from those that are on our podcast and people who have questions. They chime in. They want to know what's going on. They want to know, hey, are we going to hit a recession? Are we going to, what are we going to do? And what's some good strategies for this coming season? We're about to enter into, let's see, what are we in? We're at the end of March. Q2 is right around the corner. And how do we prepare? How do we grow forward in this awesome season? So I have major questions as I'm the host today for Marty and for Mark on the topic of lease options. All right. So Mark has been doing lease options for quite a while, guys. That's why we love that he's part of this team and what we do. He's helped us out a ton. He's helped me out understanding lease options a ton more. So Mark, what is a lease option?
What's up? So a lease option is also known as a rent to own, is a lease agreement with an option to purchase the property at any given date and time and a certain price point. So that's kind of what it is. And I love lease options. It's one of the best strategies to get into real estate if you do not have a lot of money. So I really love lease options all the way around. So yeah, we'll get into it, and I'm excited. And just bring your questions. How you doing, Marty, up there?
I'm doing good, boys. Good to see you guys. This is a really good topic because I actually have a lead right now where I was going to ask Mark how I should approach this. I've never done a lease option, and I think it would be very wise to learn this right now, especially if it does correct. And because I know, Mark, this was what you were telling me when we've had conversations about this. This is a great strategy when there is a recession, when there is a downturn, right? To get into properties for no or little money down, right? So I'm really excited, but I'm so far so good, boys. So far so good.
Well,
Good,
lease options also are even good if you're doing wholesaling. The reason why is because wholesaling, you need to buy the property at a discount. A lease option is you can actually give your seller pretty much the retail value of their property. And that's one of the main reasons why I like it. So it's just another arsenal tool to take out. And or if you're doing a subject to if you're trying to do a subject to, an example where a seller, and as you guys know, a subject to, usually you're taking over their existing mortgage subject to. Sometimes you get a seller that's got good credit, they're not distressed, and they're like, are you crazy? I'm not going to keep my mortgage on my name and sell it to you. So then I'm like, then I'll pull out the lease option strategy. They're still technically the owner. And then I actually will buy it on a lease option and allow me to sublet it to a tenant buyer at the end. So we'll get into that a little bit, but I love it. I started doing lease options, in the late 90s. That's kind of when I got into it. My background was real estate banking. The market wasn't, the houses were sitting on the market probably anywhere between 4 to 8 months at a time. And a lot of these people had to sell their properties, and for whatever reason, their new construction that happened, a lot of them, or their transfer for jobs. So back then, I had a mortgage company, and I would say to these people, hey, I'll buy your property lease option or a rent to own. A lot of times they don't know what a lease option is. So when you talk to sellers, I always use the terminology rent to own.
Well, that's a good point, Mark. So why don't we stay right there for a second? Because normally a seller, anybody, they're not going to know lease option, right? So you're going to want to go at it saying, hey, Mr. Seller, I am looking to rent this property to down the road own. Is that how you would put it? Or what would be the best way? Because I think this is really going to be key here for people.
Okay. Somebody just plugged something, so we'll go into that a second here.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So Marty, I'm sorry, I was reading now. What was your question there again, or your statement on that? I'm sorry.
Well, no, let's go with that question. But first, maybe that's a good question to go after right
All right.
away.
So who wants to read that?
Okay, here you go. This is for someone who's watching right now. Using the term rent to own or tenant buyers, there is no such entity in real estate. In conjunction with lease option is a red flag that what you're doing is illegally creating the IRS defines as a disguised sale. You also unknowingly convey equitable interest to the tenant optionee.
Okay.
All right, so let's go ahead
that
and
could
answer that.
be handled several different ways. So I've been doing lease options, God, going back in the 90s. And the reason why I started doing it is because my background is real estate banking, and I understood the guidelines back then. When you entered into a lease option agreement, the mortgage underwriters would actually almost treat that towards like a refinance. So it was really easy. I like it because it really helps. It's a stepping stone for people to get into a home, to own their property. That's kind of one of the main reasons why. Like you feel good because you're helping somebody out that actually wants the opportunity to buy the home, and they actually take care of the property. I've had people, put patios, decks in, do cosmetics. My own property here, I actually purchased on a rent to own or lease option. I did it. So I entered it. I'll tell you the example of mine. So it was in 2010 on my particular one. The gentleman wanted to rent it. The market was slow. It was, nothing was moving. You couldn't even get financing back at that time. So I entered into a rent to own with a gentleman. I didn't know if I wanted to buy it or not. So I said, okay, here's the price. We agreed to the terms. We agreed to the monthly payment. I did not ask for rent credit. So rent credit is something, when you do a rent to own, you can get like a credit, like $100 or $150 a month applied towards the balance of paying down the property. I really don't do it much these days because after that crash, there's some Dodd-Frank regulations. What this gentleman is talking about, if it's being equitable interest. If you're giving rent credit to somebody, it is considered equitable interest. And I would also check with your state, or your attorney, to make sure that in your state that how they're looked at rent to owns and lease options, the guidelines on that. But that's a Dodd-Frank federal act on that one. So anyways, back to my story here. Locked into a contract, purchased it. We did a 1-year contract. We kept renewing it. And it worked out really well. It got to a point where, I never bugged a landlord for anything. One time I had a freezer motor go, and I went and paid for it for myself. And then I started doing some cosmetics. I started putting crown molding down. I put some nice wood floors down. I knew at that time I was going to buy it, but we kept renewing it. And at that time, the reason why I didn't want to close, I was paying nothing for my rent. It was like $1,000 a month being on the water. I was like, so I was saving a lot of money and just putting it away. So then, I did that for about 2 years. Then we went and renewed it. Then I was paying like a couple $100 more. So in 2015, he actually came down with stage 4 cancer. And at that time, I knew that I better go ahead and close on it. And then I actually ended up having $47,000 in equity in the property when I finally closed on it, because I entered into a contract back in 2010, if that makes sense. Brian's got a question here. Hey, Brian, how you doing? Or he's actually stating, Brian actually knows lease options very well. Can't be a finance arrangement as per. See, okay, that's very good. So yeah, that's what he's stating there, that what we're talking about in the Dodd-Frank Act, that you cannot give certain credits. Like you got to be very careful when you're putting your contract together. So falling under the Dodd-Frank Act, rent credit, if you're doing an option fee, and we'll get into that, what an option fee is in a second. Marty, you had a question you were going to ask?
Well, all right. So what is Brian saying? We can't be a financing arrangement as per the CFPB, right? That's the Consumer Finance
Protection
Bureau. So are they saying that you have to really just separate the two, right? Like you have to have an agreement that for a renter, and then have a separate agreement saying as the buyer, right? Is that kind of the way you have to do it? You have to keep those completely separate, Mark? Or
what Brian is
stating
there, what he's stating there is like back into after the whole financial crisis, they started putting some regulations in place for seller financing, and you also have to do it as a lease option. So if you're applying, like I said, rent credit or the down payment that they're giving, if they're applying towards it, if they're applying, then it would fall into some more regulations. So you just want to make sure that you kind of understand the regulations part of it. But it's really, once you understand it, it's really simple. You just got to go through it, just qualify them. I hear some things that you don't have to have it approved from a RMLO, but I just do it anyways, just to be on the safe side. And you also want to keep your lease agreement and your sales contract 2 separate agreements. You want to keep that separate on that. So, and that's like if we're talking about what's called a sandwich lease. So we're kind of jumping ahead a little bit. I kind of want to explain a little bit about what, you have a different strategy. You have what's called a sandwich lease option. You also have what's called an assignment lease option, just like as you would like wholesaling. When you have an assignment deal, you can assign a deal, and I do a lot of these. I buy property, seller financing, and I turn around and sell it on a lease option. I like doing that instead of just renting it out. The reason why is, it's a better quality tenant that you're putting into the property. They take care of the property, and you're just going to make money when you actually end up selling the property at the end. So that's how.
Well, why don't we dig into that seller? Let's dig into the seller finance. Like that's your acquisition strategy, right? So you're acquiring the property through seller finance, and then you're going to then dispose the property via lease option, right? So can you give me an example, Mark, of one that's just like clear cut numbers of, here's how you'd approach this, the seller finance numbers are this, I got it for this. And then I was able to, move it on a lease option that looked like that. Would you be willing to do that for us?
Yeah, I actually picked one up in October. I'm sorry. When did I pick that one up? Actually, no, 2 years October. Went into, actually had a couple. I'll tell you one that actually, another one in Orlando. It was a year and a half ago. I picked it up from a seller for $150,000. Okay. And then I turned around and sold it to my tenant buyer on a 3-year term for $189,000. So you'll see the spread there on that particular property. My payment on that is $1,200 a month for all my mortgage, the payments, tax, insurance on that. And then I'm renting it to my tenant buyer. The market rents in that area are $1,500. I'm getting $1,600 from my tenant. So I'm making some cash flow monthly there. Okay. So that's kind of the numbers on that particular one. Now, this particular property, I just looked at it the other day because the Florida market's gone crazy and we entered in a while ago. That property worth now is $230,000. So my tenant buyer is under contract with me for $189,000. So they're going to make out I want them to buy it, so they're going to make out.
That's a big win for them.
Yeah, it's going to be great for them. So, and I'm still making out too. I'm still getting my spread. Gabe, you had a question?
Yeah, I have a question. And I also have a response for those who are interested in knowing more about this. If you're newer or you just kind of have your thoughts, because people have there is a downside that some people look at it, only the downside. And the reality is right now, the people that are engaged in this, like the buyer in this properties, are coming off on top. I mean, if you did something like this last summer in our Houston metro market, you're coming out like a bandit. You probably picked up another 20K or even 40K of equity just within 1 year. So that works out perfect for those type of buyers. So, because people have their different thoughts of like seller financing and the rates and these other things. And the reality is this is helpful for both parties. It's always a win-win in these type of things.
Yep. I really like it. And the reason why I really like lease options, and I'm going to talk about a sandwich lease option, because that's really how we started. Sandwich lease options are great because you can buy a property literally with 1 month's rent. I've done several of those deals before because when I talk to a seller, I tell them I'm going to take care of all the maintenance and repairs up to like $3,000. Anything more than that, usually the homeowner's insurance or something like that kicks in. So doing so, they're okay allowing me just to get in with 1 month's down. Sometimes they want a security. So how this works is walk through the numbers on something on this. Oh yeah, Brian saying about the appreciation market there for what you just mentioned there, Gabe. Yep. So we have to probably get Brian on here one of these days. He knows really a lot of lease options. Him and I have talked back and forth on strategizing different products, and he's very creative as well. Anyways, so let's use an example. I did one. Somebody's asking, where are you finding most of these creative? All right, we'll get into that in a minute, where to find those deals. Let me kind of give the numbers real quick, an example of a sandwich lease option. So I did one where the rent on that one is $2,000 a month to the seller. Okay. Now the seller is still owning the property. I'm just doing what's called a sandwich lease option. So I'm going under contract with a seller. I'm taking up all the maintenance repairs up to $3,000, and I'm doing a 3.5-year term with the seller. We're coming up with a price. We'll just use some round numbers. Let's say on one I just did $275,000. I can't with the seller on this one. Okay?
So Mark, what I'm doing is I'm going to just post this in the group, in the Facebook group, so people can get it. So this is going to be the sandwich option. Rent is $2,000 a month. So
correct.
You're under contract, or I should say you have an option to buy, or what's the next step here? We need to.
Yeah. So I have an option to buy it for $275,000. Okay. And for me to get under contract, my upfront money was that 1 month's rent upfront, $2,000. Okay. Follow so far.
Yep.
So then I go into the property, and a lot of these properties, I'm going in there, cleaning it up, painting it, making it better. You do not want to do lease options on a home that you have to put a lot of money into it. You do not want to do that. You want a nice home in a nice area, just some light cosmetics. Okay. So then what I did is I went and found a tenant buyer. And usually these tenant buyers, they have great income. That's really what I look for, people that have really good income, but they have some credit challenges. They might have had some credit issues. And I usually will do a 3-year agreement with them, because these people need to get their credit cleaned up. And it usually takes anywhere between 18 to 24 months for people to get the credit lined up to be able to qualify. And I also make sure I run them through an RMLO to make sure they qualify.
All right. So real quick, Mark, real quick. So you got an option to buy this property from the seller for $275,000. Upfront was a $2,000. Basically, was that first month, last month?
It's just the first month. That's all I needed.
First month. Got it. So you didn't even need a security deposit. That's great.
No. So now I control the property now.
Now you control their property. So you're getting a purchase contract with them. Is that what that is? Is that for 3 years? Like you're saying, hey, I'm going to rent this for you for 3 years. Do you have to get a rental contract for them for 3 years? Like what's that?
Yeah. So it's my contract with the seller. It's a purchase sales contract and a lease agreement all wrapped into one. That's really what that is. So we're just kind of going under that contract. Okay.
Yeah. Because people don't know this stuff. This is where it's like, we don't want to steamroll through this because this is really important stuff. So the contract with the seller is a purchase and sale as well as a rental agreement.
Yes. Yep. Correct. Yep. Exactly. That's how it would be. Brian just said a tip there. Thank you, Brian, for chipping in here. So that's just a tip that is it. So anyways, so then what I did is I found a tenant buyer. I sold that property for $305,000. Okay. And the market rents in that area are going for $2,300, but I got a rent for $2,500 from my end buyer. Okay. And my end buyer, just so you have an idea, they put first month, last month in security down plus 3% of the purchase price of the 305. So if you want to run the numbers on that one real quick. So they put
so about $9,000.
Yeah, roughly.
Okay.
Yep. So you follow that. And then out of that, I gave $2,000 to the seller. So you make money up front. So that's why I like lease option. You make money up front. You make money monthly payments, and then you make the remaining balance on the end of the rear when they purchase the property. That's why.
Right. And what was the spread monthly? Because you're renting it for $2,000. What's the buyer?
I'm renting it out to them for $2,500. So it's $500 a month spread on that. And they're responsible for the maintenance and repairs. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah, guys. So is this one of the reasons why? Let's go into the actual asset real quick of what, because Marty mentioned something on here in Marty's words. Um, let's qualify the asset, Mark, of like, what are we looking for? You got a newer investors like, I really want to do this. What's the type of asset? Are we looking for a certain dollar range, a certain rental range, the condition of the property? Are you saying I don't want to go over 10K of repairs? Like, what is your view? All
Yeah.
these years.
So I always look at whatever the area median price range is. Whatever that median price range, 20% above it or below it. That's usually what I look for. And then I also look for homes. I prefer single family homes in nice neighborhoods near good schools. Like Brian always says that. And the reason why is because, and I like to really look for family with children, because they're going to want the family to live in that property and be near a good school and raise their children there. That's kind of really what my target, who I really look for the buyer, a nice family that's going to take pride in it. And these people, they take care of these properties. I never have issues. Knock on wood. I've had a couple little issues, but nothing major, and they're just really good tenants. And they're usually working class people. They just had some credit challenges, and they end up buying these homes. That's really what I like about it. And lease options do have a bad rap because, and this is why Dodd-Frank kind of put this into place. There's been some investors out there that will find a property, find a tenant buyer. They have $20,000 to put down, knowing they cannot make that monthly payment, and then they turn around and evict them out, and that $20,000, the option fee, is non-refundable. They keep that money and they turn around and do it again. That's where it's going to come back and bite you in the ass. And I do not recommend that. You want to help people out. You really, really do. And that's why Dodd-Frank kind of put those procedures in places, because these people were just kind of, it's not a good strategy doing that, just taking advantage of people. What's this? What is the most you should spend on a lease option? So again, to that question of somebody's asking, you got to look at your area. Like, for example, like if you're doing on up in New Hampshire, look at the median price range versus or even Rochester. Marty, what's your median price range up in your area? You can't hear you, Marty.
We're probably like I think medium is probably like 180, 200,000.
Okay. Yep. And down here in South Florida, we're about 400, 425. So whatever that area that you're working in, you want to go the 20% above and below, because that's really where your buying pool is going to be, and where you'll be able to move that property. I do that in all my real estate, even wholesaling, seller financing. I don't want to, I've had people being, oh, this property is worth 1.5 million. I'm like, it's going to take forever to find a buyer for that property. So that is really in a nutshell really what a lease option is and how you sandwich it. But let's kind of dive in a little bit more where you find these properties. Somebody was just asking that question.
Yeah, they were asking that, Mark. Where do you find these creative deals?
Where I found a lot of them, believe it or not, is on Zillow for sale by owner. That's where I found it. I had a VA just going on there and just calling people and just saying, would you be willing to rent your property? The question is, would you be willing to rent your property for a few years, and then we close on it? And a lot of times these sellers, they like that monthly income. They want that. They like being a landlord, but they don't want to take care of the properties. They don't want to worry about a toilet leaking at 3:00 in the morning and getting a phone call. Also tired landlords. Those are another good ones. But
Mark,
Zillow,
in regards to Zillow, and I'm sorry to cut you up, but I think it's important for the audience. You probably just asked one person, right? And then if they said no, you stopped.
Yeah, usually, well, it depends. In this market right now, it's a little challenging because these homes are going so quickly. But in a normal market, you can find and I still do find rent-to-own buyers right now.
Well, what I'm saying is you probably had to ask quite a few people,
yes,
right?
yes.
Yeah. So guys, if you're going on there on Zillow and you ask 2 or 3 people that, they have for sale by owners, hey, would you rent it to me so I could buy it in a year or two? And they say no, that doesn't mean this option is dead to you. It just means you get to keep asking. Okay, Mark, I saw his strategy. He has a VA, or he has himself in the beginning pounding the pavement and knocking on doors and calling those numbers. And it might take you 35 to 50 of them to get that lease option. But if you can make $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, is that worth it to you? And the answer is yes. course it is. So yeah, it's something where, guys, this is not one thing where you just, you call it a few times and you try to see if someone will do that. You need to be on your horse because someone is willing to do this, and it's a great strategy for them. It's a great strategy for you, and it's even better for that tenant buyer.
Yeah, and I do want to mention that for those who are just hopping on right now, if you have any questions, ask the questions. The tag off what Marty was saying, whenever I first met Mark, he was really heavy into this, and I saw his back end systems, and it's legit. And so it helped me boost my VA and my team and going, okay, cool. I could see what can be done within a short period of time. And actually we were sharing VAs for a while, right, Mark? I mean, we had different people helping out different things and doing the searches and stuff. And, they have a system in place to make those phone calls. To back up what Marty's saying, if you don't have a system, it's okay. You're the one that's doing the work and you're making the phone calls. Don't give up. You also have to look at the part that you are training yourself up for more conversation. You're honing those skills down to be better in tune with talking to sellers, right? And so all of these skills are like that. The different ones that we do today is about lease option. And so Mark, that might be a good thing to help somebody with, is going, how is the seller? How are you talking to the seller of these properties? We talked about how to find them. What is the seller saying?
So the sellers just want to make sure that whoever you're putting into the property, they're not going to destroy the property, because it's an option. You can technically give the property back to them. And that's one of the big concerns about that. Just giving the property back to the seller. That's the main concern that the seller has. And I just give them references and let them talk to other people that I've done lease options with and let them kind of make their own choice. That's kind of what I'm trying to do. So we are getting a few questions in here. And Gabe, you did mention something there about sharing VAs. I highly recommend, if you're new in this business and you do not have a lot of capital, to team up with somebody. And I always call them like accountability partner, if you will. And then you guys can share expenses. Gabe and we've actually shared some different systems and tools together, and we split the costs and we just kind of helped each other out. So I highly recommend that. All right. So Brian is actually putting a little input here again. What's he saying here? So down payment. Whoops, that's not Brian. It's a Facebook user.
This one was before Brian's, Mark. This one came in before Brian's, but you can go to Brian's right after.
Go ahead, Marty. You want to read it?
Yeah. For a higher down payment, do you have them pay a low rent or have a higher contribution to the purchase price at the end? I have a deal and I wanted to create flexible options.
You can, and that's the beauty of lease options. I mean, you can make it where it works for everybody. Works for you, works for them. You just want to make it, and it makes it work for the seller. That's why the beauty of this creative. So if you just got to make sure the numbers work for you. And if you need any help, you can definitely reach out to me. But normally what I do is I like that monthly cash flow coming in, the passive income. So I try to get some cash flow coming in as, if you're being the owner of the property, the tenant in the property, that's kind of what I tend to do. With the option fees, and I have an example of one right now up in Massachusetts. I did a lease option with this one family. The down payment on that one, total in was roughly about $15,000. They only had $8,500, but they really wanted this property. And so I went with them. Great. There's a husband and wife, and they had 2 little children. It was a townhome. They went with them, went into the property. They had good income. Then COVID hit. They had some issues. And then she actually had lupus. And she goes, I can't go up and down the stairs anymore. It's a townhome. So, and this was back in early December. And I said, okay, what we can do is we can just find a replacement for you, find a new tenant buyer. When I get a new tenant buyer, when they put the money down, I'll go ahead and refund back your $8,500 on the option fee. And then I said, all right, this is what we'll do is, it's December. Why don't you stay here for the holidays? Then after the holidays, you can, if you want to move, or we can have you move out during the springtime. So that's kind of the case on that particular one. Now, what happened was, and this is one that's kind of went bad a little bit, but we're still kind of working on it. They had some really cold days up there in Boston, and they didn't have the temperature set correctly down in the basement, and the pipes burst. So there was some damage there. So, and technically, they're responsible for it. But either way, I told them, we'll fix it up. We'll split it half and half. When I get a new tenant buyer, I'll go ahead and give them the option fee of that $8,500 back. Technically, I do not have to do that, but you want to do the right thing. I just look at, this is where it's at. We'll just go ahead and replace them out. So that's kind of how that would work. And then, on that one, I'm just cash flowing a few $100s a month on that one. I'm going to talk about an assignment lease option in a minute, about where if you're not cash flowing a lot of money like this person, if you're not going to cash flow a lot of money and you get a good down payment, or you can actually just assign your position to your end tenant buyer. I had sometimes you get these sellers that were open to a rent to own, but they want market rent. So you're not going to make a lot of cash flow. So if you find somebody that you work out an arrangement with a seller, you do like first month, last month, and you get into it like for $4,500 or whatever it may be, but you find somebody that's willing to do, that has more money down, you can take your contract that you did with a seller and just sell it, your position, to your tenant buyer for like $5,000 and just make an assignment fee on that. So I've done that before. And I usually do that if I'm not getting a big monthly cash spread on that. I'll just assign my position to the end tenant buyer. All right. Does that make sense? Any questions on that? All right.
Sounds great.
Cool. If I'm going too fast or if I'm jumping around, just let me know. Brian, here's one for you. Brian is just kind of giving some good pointers here. That's a great point. Like, if you're worried about, the due on sales clause, when you're doing a subject to, this is another way around, to do a lease option. It's the same strategy. You don't get a lot of the benefits of like the tax deductions, but you still controlling their property on that one. Okay.
We have one that the one talking about who pays the property taxes on these deals, the tenant buyer or the original owner. That's
usually it's the original owner. Usually, so you're just it's just like your lease agreement. When you're doing it with your tenant buyer, you just put all your tax insurance in there. And a lot of times, the sellers are even making monthly cash flow on it as well. I have one where, in Lakeland, Florida, where the seller does not want to sell it. He wants to keep that monthly cash flow coming in because his mortgage was pretty much paid off. So yeah, that's how that would work, is usually in the lease agreement. In certain states, you have to make sure the owner of the property is the one that's got to pay for that. So you just include it. So you just do a lease. Go ahead, Gabe.
And I want to clarify a couple things. We have on this call, guys, we have a total of 3 states that we're talking about. We work in the Florida market, which is where Mark is at. Marty's in upstate New York, does the New York market. I'm in Texas, so Texas has different rules and laws and everything else that has to do with lease option. So there's some things that you can say and some things you can't say pertaining to lease option in different states. So I just want to make that clear. This is good for you to go. Mark already highlighted it, but definitely get legal advice for what you're going to be doing if you choose this route. Great point. There's good paperwork that needs to be done on all things. Whenever we do notes, we make sure we have good paper. Whenever we have notes, and all that stuff gets done through our attorneys. And we advise you guys to do the exact same thing, and for multiple reasons. So just wanted to highlight that before we move forward. Okay, cool.
So there's another thing Brian just mentioned too, and I actually had that in my notes. If you're actually looking to buy like a multifamily, like apartment building or anything, you can also purchase the property. Also, you can purchase a property on a master lease option. So that's you're buying it and you're wrapping everything into one lease option. And Brian also actually, and Gabe, I'm glad you said it. Texas, you cannot do lease options down in Texas. Now, there's a couple people, John Jackson, he does some lease options, but I don't know Texas strategy. I just don't do business in Texas. But that is true. There's some laws there on there in Texas that you can't do lease options. Something about like more than 6 months, or like you can't do a sandwich on it. But I don't know enough about Texas, so I'm just not even going to answer that.
Mark, can you explain master lease though?
Yep, I sure will. So Brian just put that in there. So a master lease option is like if you're buying and I haven't done one yet. I'm just kind of giving an education a little bit on it. So say it's in a 30 unit apartment building. You can buy that property on a lease option with the seller. It's like seller financing. You're just doing a lease option agreement. And then in that master lease option, all the subleases from all the other units fall under that master lease option property. So it's exact same strategy. But I would highly recommend, talking to an attorney that understands the master lease option to kind of put the contract together with you and the seller. But
yeah, we're gonna have to get Brian. We're gonna have to get Brian Gibbons on the show.
Yeah.
REI
Brian's skills.
A good guy.
Yeah,
Brian. Skills that kills. Thanks, Brian.
Yeah, REI skills. So yeah, he's really good on that stuff. So I've always, like I said, I love lease options. They're great during the recession, when properties can't move, and then also tired landlords. Also, I picked up a few of them, in the Airbnb. Remember when COVID hit and all the Airbnbs were locked down? These sellers were freaking out, and I went in and picked a few of them up that way, right here in South Florida, down and over in Fort Myers, Naples, and, because they didn't know what they'll be able to do with that. You can also do a lease option and do an Airbnb model. So let's talk about that a little bit. You can go under a contract with a seller. Again, you're subletting it, and that allows you to do it. And then instead of selling it to an end buyer, tenant buyer, you can go ahead and do your Airbnb model. I also had a friend, he's done this, and what he's done rehab centers, or what do they call it? Not rehab centers, halfway houses when they come out, we rent them out. So he's done that before. He's gone under contracts with sellers, and then he was putting in, I think he had 4-bedroom homes, and I think they got 2 people to a room, and they paid like $500 a week. So, and his payments on that, where I think we're only got on it, not even $2,000 a month. So he's done some of those, so that you can, that's another option. So I love it because you don't own the home, but you're controlling it through contracts. That's why I really love lease options.
Yeah, that's the beauty of it. I think that's why it's such an interesting strategy, really, because I think, what do they say, Mark and Gabe? It's like the more control you have over a property with like the less liability, the better, right? And a lease option or a lease with the option to buy is, if not the best way of having the most control with the least amount of liability. Subject to is right up there as well. I guess you could say that too, but very interesting strategy. So what would you say to people who are just looking to get started in this, Mark? What's like their first step you think that they should be taking?
So I learned this business, the queen of lease option is Wendy Patton. She was like, if you want to get her book, she was really good. Joe McCall actually has a good course. If you want to kind of look and educate yourself a little bit more, you can reach out to me. I do joint ventures with people all the time. I don't charge anything. We just do deals together. Brian, actually, you can reach out to Brian also. He's actually, he does some consulting work on doing some lease options. And Brian actually mentioned here, doing a contract for deed down in Texas. That's another option. We'll have another whole topic about contracts for deeds, but you're using another instrument, contract, if you will, controlling a property, using a contract for deed versus a lease option. The other thing about lease options, when you're doing a lease option, the contracts, like when you do it with the seller, myself, you do it as one. When you sell the property to your tenant buyer, you want 2 separate contracts. You want a separate lease contract on its own, and then you also want a sales contract, and you want to keep the down payments, because depending on your state, how they go through if they stop paying the eviction process, you can go through the eviction just as a regular tenant on that. So that's kind of one of the other reasons you want to kind of going in there. Because sometimes, like, depending on the state, if they go in there and they see 2 separate contracts, they're like, oh, you know what, we need to go, and creates a little bit longer of a process of evicting somebody on a lease option.
Yeah, that's what scares me about New York. And that's why anybody listening for the upstate New York real estate investing, just talk to your lawyer about it. I've never done one, but what's really scary is that obviously an eviction for New York takes almost 6 months. So a foreclosure can be 2-3 years, maybe longer. So, just make sure that your attorney, all right, that's writing this up for you, because you don't want to write this up yourself, pay the money to an attorney to coordinate this with you. If your attorney is not familiar with lease option, find another attorney. They're not going to be able to just kind of figure this out. You want to work with someone who's done them, who's had problems with them. You want to have people that have actually gone down the road of someone who's maybe failed these a few times, so they learn from that. So yeah, I would definitely talk to an attorney who's actually done these before.
Yep. And Brian mentioned something here. Brian's really good with contracts, so he understands. It really comes down to, like, when you do your contract, you don't want to make it that the tenant buyer is getting equitable interest in the property. That's really what it comes down to. Equitable interest means, like, then if they're doing that, then it's a different type of it's looked at a little differently depending on the different states.
Yeah. So in this case, Mark, so for my all the listeners, but especially in New York, where it's, super litigation, you're suggesting, or Brian's suggesting, that you'd want to get so remember, I have a contract with the seller, right? Because I'm the investor. I'm the one that's putting together this deal. Great. And then the other contract, or the other agreements, there'll be two for my tenant buyer.
Okay.
And it's a rental agreement. Okay. It's a lease agreement. And then there's not a purchase contract. There's an option contract. There's an optionee contract. Is that really what Brian is saying? Is that what people are thinking? Yep. Okay. So get the purchase agreement out of your heads, guys, because that's not what you're doing with your rent to own tenant. You are going to then have a lease agreement, just like you always did with a rental property, and then you'll have an option contract, which, again, talk to your attorney and make sure that it's up to snuff. But those are two big things you need to have.
Yep. So, something I wanted to just chime in on. If I'm doing a seller financing and the seller is okay doing seller financing on the property, but he wants it to be paid off at a balloon within 5 years, I will then shift and do a lease option. The reason why is, if the market shifts, I can give that property back to the seller. I don't have to, if it goes down in value, I don't have to come out of pocket an extra $50,000 if I'm paying pretty much top value of that property. If there's 20% equity in it, then it's a different story. So that's something to keep in mind there on that particular one. Brian just mentioned, then we're going to go back to other question. They don't get an option until they finish the lease in the finance. That is correct. So they have to go through the terms of the agreement, and then they can exercise the option.
Okay, well, hold on a second, just again, because I want to make sure.
Sure.
So when they sign the lease, they're not also at the same time signing an option. They're going to get that option. So we're dangling that option carrot until they, get their credit fixed, and then they're able to then buy the property. But why would they be giving me, 3%, 5% without that option, being there to be signed, so that there's at least something that can be, at least some sort of paper to keep us honest, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just part of the instrument and the structure. It's so they have skin in the game. You really want them to purchase the properties. Somebody, you want to, Gabe, you want to read this question? If you can read it.
Yeah, where are we at here? We have I have a seller. Okay, so this is someone giving an example of what they're doing for lease option. It looks like I have a seller financing deal and combining it with the lease option deal. So the seller is holding the note, and I'll have the property. So the down payment I am giving to the seller is the same amount I am charging the tenant buyer. Very similar to what Mark's talking about. Therefore, he's out of pocket at zero. So he was just talking about that's how he structured some of that. They have the option to purchase as soon as the option agreement is executed. Okay, cool.
All right, so that's a good example. You're just kind of washing it, and you're controlling the property in that one. On that one, that's how I structure my deal. Okay, that's cool. That's the thing. I mean, you can structure the deals so many different ways. All right. Somebody's saying that is totally incorrect. Let's see what this person's have to say. That is totally incorrect. I don't know what he's referring to. I have an option to purchase as soon as the option agreement is executed and the option fee is transferred. Well, they have to exercise the option if they go to and purchase that property. So maybe you and Brian can get together. I don't know who that Facebook user is because it just comes up as Facebook user.
Yeah.
On that one. This can also help find buyers of the property without going through a bidding war. That is correct. And also a great way to find buyers is work with a mortgage company, a loan officer, because they get people that come through the door all the time that they can't qualify for whatever reason, but they have the capital and they have the good income. You can work with them. And then once they go ahead and exercise that option, then you can refer them back to that loan officer. So it's a win for both parties. Okay. Yeah, I think this is a good topic. Any other questions? Brian, thank you so much for chiming in. I don't know who this Facebook user is just coming up as Facebook user. Yeah, I love Lease Options. And, if anybody has any questions, you guys can definitely reach out to me. Or you can reach out to Brian. Brian's really good at that as well. Yeah, it went really well.
Yeah, this is awesome, Mark. And again, obviously I'm not an expert in this. That's why we bring on experts like Mark and Brian. Thanks again. And I think there's some other people that have been chiming in as well, which probably know this a heck of a lot more than myself anyway. So yeah, this is why we do this, right? We're trying to figure this out together. We're trying to make sure we know all the tools so that we're not just looking at everything with a hammer, which is, when I first started, I just tried to make everything a wholesale deal, right? Yep. And that's not how it always works. You can do deals that have, no equity or, just have maybe even a little bit underwater. You can do this with a lease option, right? So these are important to know and important to understand. So this is awesome.
Yeah. So somebody's asking how to connect. Just go to Real Estate Power Play YouTube channel or Real Estate Power Play Facebook page. And in there's a description. It has all of our bios in there. Like if you want to reach out to Gabe, he's down in Texas. Marty's up in North Carolina, upstate New York, and I'm down in Florida. So just go in there and you can just reach out to us through that way, through our bio. But yeah, this has been a great episode. It's been really, hopefully it was very informative for everybody.
That's it, guys. All right, man. So guys, like Mark said, connect with everybody. We are on YouTube, Facebook. We have all different channels that we're on, podcast channels. So if you want to connect with us, go ahead and ask more questions on some other topic that you want us to go over. We'd have to go over that also and bring in some professional experts on that topic. And from here on, we'll say, see ya and make some power moves, guys.
Take care, guys.
Right,
have a good one, everybody.